everyone, and welcome to my Monday afternoon interview. This time, I'm very excited to be introducing Joey Evans to you. Joey Evans is someone that I've heard speaking twice, and the reason why it's twice and not once is after the first time I'd heard him speaking, I happened to be the PSASA convention convener, and I asked him to come and speak at our convention. And as he did the first time, he blew us away the second time as well, even those that had heard him for a second time. So I thought it would be really motivating, especially in these times, to hear from someone who really knows what it's like to overcome adversity. So let me just tell you a little bit about Joey. Firstly, hello, Joey.
How's it? Good to be here. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Joey had a dream to race the Dakar Rally. Yes, you heard me right, the Dakar Rally, regarded as the most dangerous off-road race in the world. During a local race in 2007, he was hit by another biker. He broke his back, crushed his spinal cord, and was completely paralyzed from just below the chest. You wouldn't say so looking at him now. It took 10 years with many challenges and lessons learned along the way until on January 2nd, 2017, Joey stood as a competitor on the start line of the Dakar Rally in Paraguay. I can't pronounce that name, so.
Asuncion.
Asuncion, yeah. What would follow in those next 2 weeks was an ending you simply couldn't make up. To cover your whole journey from breaking your back to racing the Dakar Rally is naturally going to be too long to cover today. For people who would like to hear the whole story, you'll have to read his best-selling book, From Para to Dakar. But today, I'd like to ask you a few questions, Joey, to understand a little bit more about, well, what makes you tick. So the first one.
Cool.
I know you have a motto of death before DNF. What's your first memory of pushing through to the finish of a race?
Oh, man, I think probably the first memory would actually be one that I didn't push through, because that's probably the one that really got me to think in a different kind of way. And it goes back a number of years. I was probably about 11 or 12 years old, and I was in primary school. You know, I was in standard 5, what's that, grade 7 now. So my final year of primary school, it was for an athletics event. And I used to be quite a good runner. I loved running and things. And I entered the 1200 meter, okay? And it was coming up for the inter-house, in a couple of months. And so what I did is I did that early morning training. And I think all of us who have got kids know what early morning training is, where you take your kids up to the school at 6 a.m. and they train before school and stuff. And I did that. We'd run up and down the grandstands and we did all this training, and it was tough. It was tough getting up in the cold weather in the winters and, whatever it took. But I did all this training, and it came to the day and I was super fit, I'd never been that fit, as a kid, running that far and things. And I started on that start line. My mom was in the crowd that day, and she didn't often get a chance to come and watch. And she watched that day, and I ran this inter-house race, and I pushed hard and things, and I ended up winning the race. And it was a fantastic one, Then you get to stand on the little box, and you get your certificate for winning this 1200 meter run. And I was just super pumped. Brilliant day, fantastic. And so then I got selected for the school team. So now we step it up a level. Now we go to inter-school. And this was a few weeks later. And I stood on that start line of this 1200 meters, which is about 3 laps, around the track. And off we started on this first lap. And I was running, and I kept up with the guys at the front, but they took off really quick. I normally would pace myself a lot better, but I kept running with them, and I was running. And we got through about the first lap, and I am struggling. I've got that stitch. I've got that taste of blood in my mouth. I'm like, I just took off way too quick. I was like, no, I've messed this up. I've messed this up bad. And we rounded that second lap, and we started going down the back straight of the second lap. And I knew I was done. I was just done. I was just in all this sort of pain and stuff. And so what I did is, on that back straight, I pulled off the track and I quit the race. And it was a real cowardly move. It was right at the back, on the far straight. There was nowhere else I was going to pull off on the front straight, behind all the field events and stuff. And there was a teacher there. And I remember him looking at me and just kind of giving me the shaking head. And he's like, and now? And what? And I said, no, I'm just done. And he was just, it was one of those ones where, like, he wasn't angry. he was just disappointed, you know, and it just kind of hit me right there. And I was like, ah, and it was one of those as a kid, I'll never forget that feeling. I mean, here I am, 46 years old now, you know, we're going back a good number of years, and I clearly remember his face, and I remember that happening. And that was something that made me realize the mistake I'd made. And the mistake I'd made was not heading out too quick and all that sort of stuff that happens in racing and that sort of stuff. But the mistake I made was quitting that race. What I should have done is I should have just slowed right down. If I needed to walk, I should have just walked, and I should have finished that race. I should have got through the distance and like kind of owned my mistake and finished the race and kind of finished with honor, if that makes sense. And so after that, I decided that I would finish races, you know, whatever it took. Naturally, sometimes, you know, it's in such a way that you cannot, but if there's any possibility you finish no matter what, even if it's at the back. And so that was a moment that probably changed it.
Which is why you've got your topic of always finish.
That's it, always finish.
Yeah, but I could understand why you would have had that feeling, because having won that previous race, in your mind, there was no possibility at that time other than winning. So when you realized that you weren't even going to get a podium place, it messed up that image that had been in your mind all the way along. But then seeing your teacher's face with that expression, that was probably the thing that made the indelible impression on your mind forever. And the thing that you still remember, that just expression of, what are you doing?
Absolutely. We don't have to talk about it anymore. I remember it well. Okay. Can we let it go now?
Okay. So another thing I've heard you talk about is riding through the night. And where does that phrase come from?
Okay, well, you know, there's a lot of different types of racing you can do with motorcycles. You know, obviously there's a lot of like, you know, track racing, then there's off-road racing, there's motocross, you know, enduro racing, hare scrambles, all sorts of different kind of disciplines. And most disciplines work on a setup, especially with off-road racing, where you either have a certain distance to cover and then there's a cutoff time. So, you know, often with an enduro race, it might be a 3 or a 4 hour cutoff time. And you have to, you know, cover a certain distance by that time. Once the time runs out, they pull you from the race wherever you're at. If you didn't make it, you're out. Otherwise, you have 3 or 4 hours and you've got to do as many laps of a certain distance as you can. And at the end, whoever's in front is the winner type of thing. But rally racing is very different. And rally racing works, it's a stage race. So every day you have to race a certain distance. Now, Dakar, that distance is about 850 kilometers a day on average for 12 or 13 days. And so you've got this distance. Now, a lot of the top riders will finish sort of mid to late afternoon, okay? Sometimes even early afternoon, depending on the stage. And then you have the other riders starting to come in. So now, but the rule is this: there is no cutoff time at the end of each day. The rule is you have to be on the start line for your start time the next day. Now, most rallies you start in the morning. At Dakar, I started at 4 o'clock each morning. At other rallies, I've started at 5 or 6 in the morning. But that's the rule. You have to be on the start line for that time. They don't care if you came in at 5 o'clock the previous day or if you came in literally 20 minutes before your start time. They don't care. And so with rally, you can choose to continue riding at night. But a lot of riders won't. Once it gets dark, if they're not nearly at the finish, they'll quit the race rather than race at night. But the thing is, if you really want to like push yourself and you really value that finish, you're prepared to ride at night. And what you do is you ride until you're time barred or until you get to that finish line. And so riding at night is like, it's a next level thing, because with rally, you're also navigating. You're following tracks, you're following compass bearings, you're following landmarks, you know, head towards the hill, go around the tree, head down the valley, follow the river for 3 kilometers, cut through at 220 degrees, you know, that kind of stuff. And so in the daytime, it's difficult. At night, it's near impossible. And also you can't see animals, you can't see, you know, things in the track, you know, your vision is restricted to your light beam on your bike. And so it's a lot harder and a lot slower and a lot more difficult riding at night. And that's why a lot of guys quit when it gets dark. And so that's where that comes from, is that you don't quit when it gets dark. You quit when you finish the stage.
Yeah, but as you've said, the conditions are so horrendous that, I mean, it's not a question of you can see half or you can see 75%. You can see 10% in the dark, if that. And that depends on if there's moon or cloud or whatever the case may be. And one thing I really want to ask you, and I'm going to refer to another discipline in order to bring this in. When Bruce Fordyce had finished one of his wins at Comrades, and I think it was the time that he momentarily held the record for Comrades, or for one of the Comrades runs. And they asked him, how he's feeling. Isn't he really tired and what have you? And Bruce just expertly swung it around, and he says, the real heroes of the Comrades are the competitors who are coming in between 11.5 and 12 hours, because those guys have been on their feet all day. Now, when you're riding at night, it really means that you've already had an incredibly long day. Your concentration levels have to be 100%. How do you deal with the fact that already so much of your energy is sapped up? How does that affect your ability to actually be able to perform? And those are the things, the endurance things, that really fascinate me about these high endurance rally races over a long period of time.
100%, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there. If we look at the top factory guys, for instance, at Dakar, most of those guys are sleeping in camper vans. They got full teams following them, servicing everything, preparing their food, washing their clothes, getting everything ready. For an average guy like me as an amateur rider, further back in the field, it's a very different race. Now, for the pros, they take massive risks in terms of speed, in terms of terrain, that kind of stuff. So they have a very high risk environment. They're not paid to finish the race. They're paid to win the race. And so they race, they're racing at a high speed, and that's their risk. For us guys further back, here's a good example. When I finished the 2017 Dakar Rally, my finishing time was more than double that of the winner. So that kind of gives you a bit of perspective in terms of how much time I spent on the bike. But with us guys further back, the way it works at Dakar is they start off the bikes every morning at 4 o'clock. After the bikes, they wait half an hour. Then they send the cars. After the cars, they send the trucks. Now, the cars and the trucks are faster than at least half the bikers. So for someone like me who's further back in the field, I was passed by cars and trucks every single day, going through the dunes, trucks coming past us over different sides, cars coming from different directions. Obviously, if a truck goes past you in the desert, you are completely blinded for like 15 seconds just because of the dust and things. So we run a very different type of danger at the back. Not only is it longer hours, but we have this added danger of cars and trucks. Also, for the top riders, if they come there and they get to like a small little stream, sort of riverbed running through, they'll ride through there, through the water, and carry on. Now you send, 80 or 90 bikers through there. You send about 60 or 70 cars and about 50 trucks through that. That has suddenly become a 40-meter wide mud bath, with ruts half a meter deep, from all the truck tires and that kind of stuff. And so it's a very different, very different terrain we come across, further back. The top guy came across there at 3 p.m. through the small river. I'm coming through at 10 o'clock at night into a 40-meter mud pit with these ruts and stuff. So also the track deteriorates the later you get. And so it certainly is a case of the further you back in the field, the more you're going to suffer. Absolutely.
Well, I found it fascinating the way you spoke about how these trucks come past you. And I would imagine that that's if you're lucky, because every now and then they go over you.
Yes.
Are you going to tell us just a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you a bit about that. I'll keep it pretty brief. I know I don't have a lot of time, but I was riding. I was actually coming last on that day, and it was the second last day of the Dakar. I was in last place in the bike category, and the cars had started to catch me, and they'd gone. A number of cars had gone past me, and I was in this section where it was like two parallel ruts. This wound through the semi-arid desert. And I was in the left-hand rut, and these ruts are filled with fish, like this really fine dirt, so you can't see. And my alarm went off that says there's a guy behind me that wants to overtake. And I looked back, expecting to see this guy, normally about 200 meters back, which is what they normally, when they normally buzz you. But he was like 20 meters back, and he was doing more than double my speed. And I tried to swerve out the way, but right there, my front wheel was just caught up in that rut. I couldn't swerve out of the rut. And so I kind of tried to get to the side, and I separated from the bike, and this guy just crashed right into my bike and completely rode over my rally bike, just completely destroying this bike. And pretty much, putting me right out of the race on the second last day.
But you finished, and for people to find out how you did that, they'll have to read the book.
There we go. There we go.
So let me move on from there. So at Dakar, I know you rode many times at night, even finishing one stage at what, 2:15 a.m. and another at 3:30 a.m. And you're supposed to be up at 4 o'clock. So what's been your scariest nighttime racing experience?
Yeah, well, it's not only up at 4 o'clock, you're often up at like 2:30, because you have to eat before you leave, and you have to get kitted up and all that type of stuff, and put on all your gear, and then you have to get to the start line and stuff, which is often the other side of the bivouac and things. So it's you're up a lot earlier. And can I tell you, trying to eat breakfast at 2:30 in the morning, especially when it's like pasta with tomato sauce and that kind of stuff, it's hard to get it down, but you just chug and swallow, you need the calories. But probably the most difficult, or the scariest, I should say, time riding at night for me, it wasn't in Argentina or Bolivia, which was where the Dakar was, or even in North Africa. I've been up there at night in Mauritania as well. But the scariest for me was actually Botswana, just up the road. And the difference is, when you do a big international event, you have a lot of trackers on the bikes. So the guys know exactly where you are. They know your GPS position. They know if the bike is standing up straight or on its side. They've got like these impact accelerometers, I think it is, so they can tell if the bike's crashed even. And then they have choppers and medical guys and all that kind of stuff. So on the big international stuff, it is dangerous, but you're kind of being watched by satellite, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I did a race that went through Northern Cape and Botswana called the Asuncion Rally, and we didn't have any kind of tracking on the bikes or anything like that. And we went through a section up into Botswana, and we were sort of like midway to more northerly in Botswana, where it's still very wild, with a lot of wild animals and that kind of stuff out at night. And we went through a town, or a little dorpy, which was supposed to have some petrol and things, and they'd run out of petrol. These kind of places, they get their petrol every couple of months, and sometimes they have, sometimes they don't. And so a lot of bikers didn't have enough petrol, and I was one of the guys that didn't get any petrol there. But then we headed off. We were all pretty spread out and stuff. And there was a couple of different routes you could take to get to the next bivouac. And I took one route, and I'm riding along there on my own now, and it's got dark now, and now it's at night, and I'm riding through the bush in Botswana. It's a dirt road kind of thing, so it's not really a single track, but it kind of got narrower and narrower. And I was basically on a Jeep track then at the end. And I'm in the bush now, but I'm riding my bike, and I'm wearing all my kit, and my light's shining. And so I'm feeling all right. I've ridden at night, in kind of wild places before. And so I'm pretty comfortable. And then my bike starts to splutter, and I run out of petrol. And so what I did is then, and what happens is your light runs off the movement of the engine, if that makes sense. So the moment your bike stops, about 5 seconds later, and the light dies, and it was pitch black. But with the bike, you can light over on the side and stand it up, and you've often got a little half cup of petrol left, that you can get a little bit more. And I did that, and I got the bike started again, and I still had, I think probably at that time, probably about 30 or 40 Ks to go. And I'm like, oh man, I'm really stuck out here now. And I got the bike started again. I rode again. And within a kilometer or two, I just get that splutter, and I'm shaking around, come on, get every little last bit of petrol out of that tube. And then the bike just cut, and the light goes out, and I'm literally in the middle of the Botswana bush on my own, and it's at night. And I'm thinking, I know there's wild animals out here. In fact, on that race, the very next day, there were lions in the track. The route we were going, and I had another buddy who saw a hyena. And so this is proper wild. And there's elephants there and this kind of stuff. And so now it's dark. So now I carry a little emergency headlight, those little Petzl things. Yeah, but I had like the super mini one. It's got like the little elasticated thing that kind of comes out of it. It's like sort of the size of a 50 cents piece or whatever. And I popped this on my head. I took my helmet off, popped this on my head, and I turn it on. And I'm thinking I can maybe look around the bush. And I promise you, it gave me the size of a dinner plate of light at my feet. And if I look up, nothing. It was just the most useless little torch ever. It was like, fine if you're going to work on a problem on the bike, but anything more than that, nothing. And now I had to start walking. And so I started pushing this bike, down the sand track. And I'm just walking with this tiny little thing on my head, which is a waste of time. I can't see, I can see, almost nothing. And all I can hear is my boots just crunching through the sand, and the wheels just slowly crushing the sand as I'm walking alone. And it is quiet, but you just hear rustling in the bush here, rustling in the bush there. you know, a funny little call down there, something you heard back here. You keep turning around, and it was like, and knowing that they didn't know where I was, and I was on my own, and I walked for several kilometers, you know, and then eventually another guy happened to be on the same route. He stopped and he gave me petrol, and we got through. But that it was probably about 45 minutes or an hour that I walked alone through that Botswana bush that night. That was by far the scariest nighttime on the bike that I've had.
And you were probably quite grateful that there was one dude that was a little slower than you were.
Well, it was a little awkward when I hugged and kissed him, but yeah.
So one of the things that has come out of your marvelous talks that I've heard, both of them, is that in building up to the Dakar Rally, it wasn't a question of just doing a few local races and, you know, getting really good at it and then going to Dakar. You have done other long and grueling races, which would, in a sense, compare, maybe not as grand as Dakar, but there were a number of steps that you had to take in order to qualify. So the qualifying process in itself was quite grueling, and there were occasions that you had some accidents on those races.
Yeah, you know, like racing motorbikes is dangerous, and rally racing is widely considered as probably the most dangerous type of off-road racing you can do, because you're in unknown terrain with a lot of unknown factors in terms of, you know, animals and washouts and all sorts of things that are just happen on the track, you know. And along with that, you're racing when you're very tired, because when you're doing day after day after day races, you're not fully concentrating. You know, it's hard to keep, you know, switched on the whole time. Like a motocross race is 20 minutes plus one lap, or, you know, is what a motocross race is. So pretty much you got like, you know, 22, 25 minutes of focusing and the race is over. Whereas a race like Dakar is 13 days, 9,000 kilometers, which is the same distance as from Cape Town to Cairo, plus another 1,000 kilometers. And you cover that in 2 weeks. So you can't stay, you know, fully focused all the time. And so dangers crop up, you know, a lot with those kind of races, and they crop up because of speed, because of terrain, and because of human fatigue.
Well, now, having painted that picture, I've got to ask you, you're finding the time to do all this racing, going away, going to different countries, taking all sorts of risks. How do you manage to stay married?
Yeah, you might want to ask Meredith that one. But no, I found, you know, I found with my life, and I know there's a lot of guys that can relate to this, you know, is that, you know, I love adventure. You know, I love, you know, I'm not super fond of taking risk and you know, having accidents or anything like that. That's really not what I'm about, you know. But I am about adventure, going to different places, you know, seeing new things, you know, incredible events, that kind of stuff. Now, the thing is this though, if I decided, okay, no, I'm a family guy, I'm not going to do any of that kind of stuff, I'm going to stay at home all the time, and I'm not going to get involved in any of that sort of stuff, it would be pretty miserable for me, you know. But also, if I'm the kind of guy that's going out and doing that stuff all the time and not spending any time at home and anything like that, then I lose the stuff that's most valuable in my life. And so what we found, you know, when I say we, I say myself and my wife, you know, over the years, we've discussed this many times, and, you know, finding the balance is to find that balance where I go and I do these things. But I'm also, then when I'm home, and we do great family stuff, and we do stuff together as a couple and that sort of stuff. So the key there, you know, for any of the guys, you know, watching this, or ladies watching this, is to find the balance. You know, don't be the guy or the lady who never chases your dreams and is just like, no, I'm a family person now, so my dreams are all gone away now. It's not like that. But also, don't be the person that you do all these dreams and you forget about the stuff that's really important in life. So balance is key.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because I've often heard this saying: if you want someone to do the job properly, give it to a busy person. And I've also heard it said that when you go to the house where two people are unemployed, it's usually in a mess. But if you go to the house of somebody where both parties are employed, you'll usually find that that house is very tidy. Now, one can quip well because they've got money to pay help. But the fact of the matter is that busy people seem to find that balance between keeping their homes tidy, looking after their family, spending time with their kids, and doing the things that are necessary to fulfill themselves. And I think this is what you're really demonstrating to us.
100%. When I come back, from doing a race or doing a trip or something like that, man, I am so motivated for life, and I want to like instill that in my children. I want to be like, man, you should have seen these places I've seen. You've got to see this. You got to do this. You got to like, and I'm like, I'm alive and I'm like motivated and I'm pumped and that kind of stuff. And so it gives me that like drive that I bring back home again, and then we carry on again. So it's certainly. I would agree with you with that. I would say, yeah, that's certainly the case.
And Joey, I think it also gives you a huge amount of proven resilience, which is so needed today with the challenges that we all face.
Yeah, no, it does. I think also with with anyone growing up, we look back on all of our childhoods and we all had like different things that was a challenge growing up. Everyone does. There's not. I don't believe there's people who had perfect childhoods and people who had terrible. And, I think we're all fit kind of in between that, where there was good and bad things. But when we look back at these things, whether it was as a child or as young adults and that kind of stuff, we can all confidently say that they made us who we are today. If we went through some hard stuff, it made us, more resilient. It made us stronger, and it made us, just to have the mindset to know that we can get through and we can do hard things. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think it does help with that mindset.
And Joey, your story is incredibly dramatic, but what you're in a sense illustrating to us is that everyone has a story that is worth telling. We all have lives. We've all gone through things. We've all gone through interesting experiences. And one of the worst things that we can do in a sense is compare our story to somebody else's and say, well, mine is less interesting, because everyone's life really is an interesting story. And so I'd like to go on to, since finishing the Dakar Rally in South America, you had the opportunity to do a race in North Africa along what is considered the original Dakar route, which must have been really emotional for you, from Monaco to Dakar, Senegal. Tell us a bit about how that was.
Oh, that was an incredible experience. I had the opportunity last year, January, so it's not long ago, just sort of, 14, 15 months ago. And what I did is I, had opportunity to go with 4 other riders. So it was 5 of us on a team. And the Dakar moved from North Africa to South America, and now it's moved to Saudi Arabia, mainly because of, threats from Al-Qaeda and these kind of problems, political and extremism problems. And because Dakar is a big ticket, if that makes sense. So it attracted a lot of that stuff. But there's been a group of guys that have continued to run a race from Europe, down to Dakar, called the Africa Eco Race. And so when the opportunity came up to be on this team to go and do this race and actually ride some of the original tracks, through North Africa, the kind of stuff that I'd seen, as a kid growing up and that kind of stuff that got me dreaming of Dakar with these places in North Africa, man, I just jumped at the opportunity. And it was an incredible race. We raced from Monaco, over into Italy. We took the ferry across and then to Morocco. We raced all the way through Morocco, Western Sahara, Mauritania, down into Senegal, and we finished in Dakar. And it was just an incredible race, incredible experience riding through the deserts in Mauritania. Just beautiful. But I had a bit of a challenge on the second last day. We finished all the racing section for the day, and we were just heading to the bivouac, which was a couple 100 kilometers away. And about halfway through that, I was riding with 3 other guys. We were on a little skinny tar road, just a little bit bigger than 1 car's worth, and then just desert and a couple little clumps of trees and stuff. And we're riding along doing just over 100 k's an hour on this road in the middle of nowhere. And there's this clump of trees. And as we get closer and closer to these trees, as we get on them, a camel just steps out right into the track. You obviously heard the bikes and maybe got a bit spooked or something. It was a wild camel out there. And I just saw this and I just hit the brakes as hard as I could. But I was the guy in front, and I didn't have a chance to stop or move. And I just went straight into the camel. And I had a massive crash. The guy behind me, he skied. He hit the same camel as well as I did. And the other guy on my right, a British rider, he went kind of like, caught the legs of the camel. And so it was like 2 of us went down hard. He managed to stay up, but I was completely concussed. So I was out cold, and I'd torn open all my forehead, and I'd torn the ligaments or the tendons in my shoulder, and I'd broken my wrist, and I was just in a bit of a mess. And I ended up getting choppered out of there in the chopper, and they took me to they had to land, and then they had to get me in a land vehicle, and it probably took about 6 or 7 hours to get me to a hospital, because we had to cross the border into Senegal, and they got me to a hospital around about midnight in Senegal, a government hospital in Senegal, which is not a pretty place. And we went through some x-rays. I thought I had some internal bleeding, and the paramedics stitched me up in the passage there. It was quite an experience. But the bottom line was that they cleared me of internal bleeding, and I got back to the bivouac, in the ambulance, early the next morning at about 6 o'clock, as the bikes were leaving, because it was a 6 o'clock start that morning for the bikes. And my team had managed to collect my bike, and they had fixed my bike through the night. And so my bike was there ready to go. And so the last day was purely about a 30-kilometer race along the beach in Dakar, just that final section. And so I said, no, I've got to do this. And so I rode down that beach, and I did those, I think it was 22 Ks on the dot, I think it was. And I did those last 22 Ks so that I could finish that race. So it was another one of pushing hard, but we rode that beach with a broken wrist and torn ligaments in my shoulder, and with tears filling up my goggles, but across that finish line. I think it was the photo at the finish, which you got on the promo page for this interview.
Yes, indeed.
But that was the photo at the finish, and we finished that race. And it really is a case of, it's like I don't regret doing it. It was fantastic. Obviously, the injuries, it's horrible, and there's no bragging rights in getting injured. It's terrible getting injured. I avoid it as much as I can, but it is a part of the type of racing that I've done. And so, yeah, it's finishing races is a mindset, and
always finish.
Always finish. If there's
doesn't
any
matter
way
if you've got into a camel, if they had to take you to hospital, if you've got broken bones and fractures and whatever, you get back in there. Guys, fix up the bike. I'm getting back. I'm going to finish this race. Joey Evans, you are crazy.
Death before DNF.
So this is obviously being recorded, and just for the sake of our people that have tuned in now and those that are going to be watching the recordings, how do they get hold of you? I've put two things in the chat box. Joey Evans, Joey at joeyevans.com. That's wrong. It's Joey at joeyevans.coza, isn't it?
Correct. Joey at joeyevans.co.za.
And the website.
That's it. Yeah. joeyevans.co.za.
So it's just joeyevans.co.za. Well, I must say it's been an absolute pleasure. I think whenever we get together or have a chat, it's a whole load of fun. I'm just knocked out. I mean, I've done a few things that are fairly tough, like 3 comrades and 13 2 oceans, nice, and what have you. But I don't really think that it compares to what one goes through with the Dakar Rally. So I am full of admiration. I'm not even trying to compare what I've done to what you've done.
No, it's all the same though. It's the same mindset, whether you're doing a comrades or a Dakar, yeah, or you're pushing through, trying to finish your degree. If you're someone studying, it's all that. It's the same attitude. So it is different, but it's that same thing of you just keep going no matter how tough it gets, because you're not out when you think you're out. You still got a lot more fight left in you when you think you're out. The only difference between Dakar and comrades is it would be like doing the comrades 13 days in a row and someone trying to kill you every day.
Well, I think that's a wonderful place to end it, Joey. Thank you so much. And
cool.
I hope just one last quick thing. Are you planning any more crazy stuff like this in the near future that we should know about?
No, there'll always be more, but I am done racing. I decided after that last one that I was done. I'm 46 years old now. And so we're done racing, but I will ride bikes, my whole life until they put me in the box. And, there's gonna, I want to do cool trips. When we're doing these speaking, obviously now with lockdown, with COVID, travel's a lot less, but in the past, whenever I spoke in different countries, I'd always try to organize to go riding. And so I've been fortunate to ride in Dubai and Australia and Kenya and, these kind of cool places. And I want to keep doing that. I want to go to far-flung places and ride bikes with the local guys and have some cool adventures.
While there's still breath in your body. Joey Evans, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And
awesome.
Thanks for your wisdom and your motivation.
And thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Cool. Cheers.